This is a gender issue. According to national statistics, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men will be raped. 91% of victims of rape and sexual assault are female, and 9% are male. While a female high school teacher with her male teenage student makes the headlines, the disturbing reality is that 96% of people who sexually abuse children are male. And if each case were written about in the newspapers as happened to that teacher, there wouldn't be room for any other news. Is this so common it's not even considered newsworthy? The gender disparity in these numbers is insane. They demonstrate a cultural propagation of violence against women and a tolerance of violence in our men. With our current understanding of psychology, we can clearly state that upbringing and teaching have more to do with these numbers than some arcane belief in an uncontrollable male animal nature. How are men being trained? How are women being trained? The cost of rape. Congress passed the Violence Against Women Act in 1994, due largely to the significant financial burden that gender-based crime has on society. However, the Supreme Court removed the teeth of the bill in 2000 by saying it went beyond the scope of federal powers. This is a travesty. This is another reason that a constitutional amendment is needed. Even laws supported by both parties can be undercut by a few voices on the Supreme Court. The Violence Against Women Act expired on December 21, 2018. Rape is the most expensive and prevalent crime. The lifetime cost of rape per victim is $122,461. Annually, rape costs the U.S. more than any other crime, $127 billion, followed by assault, $93 billion, murder, $71 billion, and drunk driving, including fatalities, $61 billion. So rape costs the country more than all of those other serious crimes. 81% of women and 35% of men report significant short or long-term impacts, such as post-traumatic stress disorder. These violations are not only a violation of our property right in our bodies, but they are also stealing our money, time, and happiness. The sad truth is not only does it cost the victim in terms of therapy and medical care, but it also affects their relationships with their husbands and children. I work with many women who discover the hidden psychological effects hold them back from breaking through in business, financially, in marital relations, and other areas of success in their lives. How are you going to protect the women and children in your life? How are you going to support an end to this violence? Violence in child rearing. When we train children to obey with violence by spankings and beatings, what are we really doing? If a stranger walked up to you on the street and slapped you hard across the face, or if a customer punched you in the stomach, you would have every right to sue them for assault and you would win. Why? They had no right to touch or harm your personal property, which is your body. That smack across the face doesn't even have to leave a lasting mark. It was a violation of your person. It was violence. If I slap a child I'm caring for across the face, I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm using violence to achieve my will and by inflicting pain or harm on that person's body without their consent. I am violating my child's property right in his or her own body. If we study the two actions objectively, we can see they are the exact same action, yet one we call a crime and the other is called love or proper training. This is a logical contradiction. Let's use a powerful logic tool called matching. You can use this all the time to find the contradictions in society and in your own thinking. The facts are, person A strikes person B's body. That contact was unwanted. There is no express or implied permission given by person B. There is no agreement for such contact. What might be some differences in the two situations that could explain why one scenario counts as a violation and a crime, while the other is considered morally sound? Some differences include the relative physical size of the parties, a lower mental competence level of person B, the motivation of person A, and the relationship between the parties. Size. If person B is a dwarf instead of a child, the slap is still a crime. What about mental status? If person B is a mentally challenged adult, the slap is still a crime. Mental competence cannot remove the moral violation. What about motive? Spanking is deemed to be done from love for the child's own good. What if the person slapping you across the face on the street is doing it out of love? They may be your biggest fan and think that you have lost your true message and want to wake you up to the fact that you have sold out. So having a misguided motive of love behind a purposeful assault doesn't make it okay. Relationship. What is the difference then? The difference is that we assume we have the right to slap our child because we consider the child to be our property. And the law agrees. In my opinion, this is a clear example of when the law is logically inaccurate and immoral. In most parents' minds, but especially parents who use corporal punishment, spanking makes sense based on this deep, almost subconscious frame of how they think and see the world. My child is my property, it belongs to me, and I can do what I want with my property. Don't try to stop me or you are violating my parental property right. Am I allowed to kill my child? No. How about beat my child till he or she is bruised and bones are broken? No. How about starve my child? No. Am I allowed to sell my child as a slave? No. Am I allowed to have sex with my child? No. So we recognize that most of the legal actions that I can do with my other types of property, meaning destroy, dispose of, or use for my benefit or pleasure, are immoral when applied to children, just as they are when applied to interactions with any human being. Why? Is it based on some subjective standard of being nice or not causing pain? No. Even though not properly articulated by the law, I cannot do those things to my child, but because we recognize that a child, as a human being, has certain fundamental rights, including the right to life. If we accept that we each have a full inherent property right in our own bodies, when did this right begin? When we turned 18, 16, 12? Did somebody wave a magic wand and say, now you have a property right in your body? No. This right is an inherent fundamental part of being human, which at the very least starts at birth. This logic exercise reveals a flaw in our thinking, an internal contradiction that is widely accepted in society and is enshrined by the law. I once thought like that too, because that is how I was raised. The verse, honor thy father and mother. Whom the Lord loves, he rebukes and chastens. Spare the rod and spoil the child, which is interpreted by these people to mean you can beat your child with a rod to keep them from becoming a bad person. But like many things I was taught, that was a wrong and illogical interpretation. The many instances in the Bible that talk about the rod or staff are actually describing a source of strength, protection, knowledge, and transformation. As in Psalm 23, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. As a child, I used to take our goats out to graze in the field, and I carried a large shepherd's staff. The staff was not to beat the goats with. It was used to guide them to the right field, to direct them, to give them boundaries, to pull them out of a ditch, and to fight off wild dogs that tried to attack them. It was used to protect them, not beat them. Numerous Bible scholars now believe we are misinterpreting the phrase to mean physically beating a child, rather than giving them spiritual knowledge, boundaries, and protection to keep them on the straight and narrow. Yet as a teen, I truly believed that by spanking my younger brother and sister, I was raising them right and protecting them. That was what I'd been taught since birth. I had received many spankings, slaps, and head knuckles. That is what I thought godly child rearing was. Yet, as a 10-year-old, I saw it was anger that drove the spanking hand. Even as my father would say, "I'm doing this for your own good because I love you," or "it hurts me more than it hurts you," I was no dummy. I could see the grimace of anger when temper overcame him. I could see the aunties get angry and lash out with a slap. I knew it was wrong. If discipline was supposed to be about love, how come love was never shown when they were administering the spankings? Even as a child, I determined never to spank in anger, to always give the little kids in my care multiple chances and warnings, the 3-warning rule, and then to spank them on the bottom with just a few swats with my hand, with patience and explanation, and hold them and comfort them afterward. This was a far more moderate form of spanking than I received as a child, which involved belts, bent coat hangers, shoehorns, and a large wooden paddle, a hairbrush, or anything that looked like it would hurt, and did. I believed that moderate spanking was necessary to prevent a child from growing up to be a spoiled brat and harming themselves and others. It wasn't until years after college that I was introduced to Alice Miller through her book, The Drama of the Gifted Child, where she describes how certain childhood experiences create adults with very specific personality and achievement traits. Fascinated, I saw myself and many people I knew described in those pages, our strengths and weaknesses. Miller was a strong advocate against child abuse from her work with children and seeing the effects of these experiences expressed in adults. Reading Miller's books spurred my journey of healing from abuse. They gave me a deeper understanding of the psychological processes at work in the abused and the abuser. Through her, I understood for the first time the complete illogic of trying to teach children not to be violent or harm others by using violence on them. The logical conclusion that a person comes to when they are hit and then told not to hit others, of course, is that when violence is done by someone in authority, it is okay. Just wait until you are the one who is stronger and in authority. Then you can be violent to others, and it will be morally fine, even praiseworthy. How do you think this norm has affected our society? I believe that most parents are doing the best they can, and that they love their children and want them to be happy. As I saw in my own life, blindly accepting the way you were raised as the right way without logically examining it can lead to unwittingly continuing cycles of abuse and violence. Is there a better way to teach your child to be kind and good than through violence? What is the goal of child rearing? What is the way we want to teach our children? Many confused parents ask me, what is my relationship and responsibility to my child if I base it on this concept of property rights? What am I allowed to do, and what is the goal? I can't say that I've figured it all out, so I invite you to work through it with me. Just because we don't know all the right answers yet is not a reason to continue the violations. We can act now on what we do know is correct and trust that we will understand the rest with more time and experience. I see our role as parents not as owners of our children, but stewards. The child already has a full property right in his or her own body. That right is full and complete at birth. By having a child and deciding to keep it and raise it, we have accepted a social contract to raise that child until it can care for itself. Part of that inherent obligation is to protect her, feed her, and train her to be a happy, healthy adult. What is the most critical part about being an adult? Making choices. A mature, well-adjusted adult is one who can accurately weigh costs and benefits and choose the long-term benefit over instant gratification. How do we teach that skill to children? How do we master any complex skill? With practice. How can we learn to make choices if we are only taught to obey? If our will is always overruled? If we act out of fear of arbitrary punishment rather than being allowed to receive the logical consequence of our decision? How are we teaching our children to make smart choices? By taking away all their choices and forcing our will on them? Or by teaching them to think and reason? How about giving them the opportunity to learn to choose between multiple safe choices by communicating rather than forcing?